Our story begins with a fire. On March 22, 1889, a fire was discovered near the furnace of the town hall and rapidly spread through the building. The impressive structure, with its small opera house, was the pride of Dover. The conflagration ripped through the building and became so intense that it spread to the steeple of the Belknap Church next door. The church was saved, but the town hall was a total loss. The embers were still cooling when the town leaders began planning a new town hall. The original site at the corner of Washington Street and Central Avenue was considered unlucky. 2 town halls had already burned down. When the town leaders searched for a new location, their eyes fell on the William Hale House. Built in 1806, the Hale House was one of the most prominent residences in Dover. The large federal-style house was home to William Hale, one of the town's leading merchants, a U.S. congressman, and a member of the state legislature. The house became famous for a visit by Revolutionary War hero Lafayette. The town leaders coveted another parcel of land, the site of St. Thomas's Episcopal Church, a Gothic-style wooden structure built in 1840. The town took both properties by eminent domain. Hale House was moved to its present location. The old St. Thomas's Church, which was in disrepair, was demolished. St. Thomas's Vestry got to work planning a new church. They reviewed the drawings of a British architect who had recently arrived in America. He was known for working in the Gothic Revival style, which sought to revive the medieval simplicity of English country churches. The vestry notes from August 15, 1890, record the meeting with Henry Vaughan. After discussing changes to the original drawings, Vaughan was chosen as the architect for the new church. Ultimately, Henry Vaughan was involved in more than 50 academic and religious buildings, including 2 significant cathedrals, St. John the Divine in New York and the Washington National Cathedral, America's church. Why is this story important? Because the buildings that we use as our parish house and sanctuary are not only significant to us, they are historic and architectural treasures. Many generations of parishioners at St. Thomas's have left us a valuable legacy. Now it's our turn to be good stewards. The William Hale House and St. Thomas's Church have been on the National Register of Historic Places since the 1980s. Because of their historic and architectural significance, we try to follow the guidelines laid out in the Secretary of the Interior's standards for the treatment of historic properties. The guidelines impose certain restrictions on materials and methods for doing repairs and renovations. Grants from preservation organizations require that we follow these rules. While we worship or use our historic buildings to serve the community, we can see signs of age. Peeling paint, some of it lead-based, which requires special remediation, decaying wood moldings, crumbling plaster on the carpet from water infiltration, worn slate tiles that sometimes fall, endangering pedestrians and vehicles. From the basement to the roof, we see the ravages of time on our beautiful buildings. Where do we even start? The property committee has skilled hands and lots of how-to knowledge, but we knew that we couldn't tackle everything at once. While we rushed to prop something up, something else was falling down. We knew we needed expert advice, someone who could take a holistic view of our property and help us make decisions. We turned to Arcove, a Portsmouth-based architecture firm with a special interest in historic rehabilitation. Founding principal architect Tracy Kozik is a New Hampshire native, member of the prestigious American Institute of Architects, and even apprenticed as a preservation carpenter. She has experience with church architecture from working on historic St. John's Episcopal Church in Portsmouth. In the spring of 2023, the property committee invited Tracy to meet with us, along with members of the vestry and finance committees. As Episcopalians, we love to examine all angles and give everyone a chance to voice their concerns. Fortunately, Tracy, who's one of us, understood. After much discussion, we came out of the meeting with 3 priorities. The first was to identify repair priorities. The second was to create a maintenance plan, and the third was to look at how we can repurpose our spaces. Over the next months, we scoured our archives for information on our buildings. We uncovered copies of the original applications to designate Hale House and the church as historic places. We found survey maps, old photos, even antique postcards. An expert on federal-style domestic architecture, Trina Crochet, came down to Dover to tour Hale House and share her expertise. Meanwhile, Tracy and the Arcove team inspected every nook and cranny of our buildings to assess their condition and created measured drawings. We met with Tracy in July to review their progress. In October 2023, the first draft of the report was done. It was 66 pages long, which sounds daunting, but don't worry. Like children's books, it's mostly pictures. So what's in this report? Historical buildings conditions assessments have several parts and follow a format with information for each type of reader. Aside from us, the congregation of St. Thomas's, the report is meant to communicate to experts in preservation, architects, engineers, tradesmen, and contractors who will work on the buildings. One important audience is organizations that give grants to preserve historic buildings, like the National Trust for Historic Preservation, the Fund for Sacred Places, and LCHIP, our state fund for conserving land and historic structures. If you read nothing more than the executive summary and the budgetary opinion of probable costs on page 61, you'll get the gist of the report. But there's so much more. Let's take a deeper look into what's in the report and how to read it. The executive summary is a high-level assessment with recommendations for going forward. The introduction describes the general condition of our buildings, and there's good news. Our buildings need some work, but they're in pretty good shape. That's because even in lean times, we've invested resources in keeping them up. With the help of an LCHIP grant, we put a new roof on Hale House, reglazed the windows of the Dallas room. We also replaced the slates over the choir porch. Last year, we rebuilt the front entryway of Hale House, and we continue the work of flashing and sealing around roof joints. Getting a good report on our buildings is like getting a gold star for good stewardship. The next part of the report puts the buildings in historical context and reviews the significant changes to them since they were built. We already mentioned that Hale House was moved, only 150 feet, but in 1890 that must have been quite a challenge. We also learned more about the Hale family, which included clergymen like Samuel Hale, who was the master of a Latin grammar school and served as a judge in Portsmouth. The colorful Hale family also had ties to important historical figures like President James Monroe, who visited in 1817, and a later President Abraham Lincoln. There is a juicy story about Lucy Lambert Hale, who was romanced by the president's son, Robert Todd Lincoln, and was secretly betrothed to John Wilkes Booth, who assassinated Lincoln. He was captured with Lucy Hale's photo in his pocket. Part 3 of the report is an assessment of existing conditions. Here's where we get into the good, the bad, and the ugly. We see things like the deteriorating brick piers holding up Hale House and signs of water damage under the buildings. Stains on the wall of the church, rainwater penetrating the mortar in the tower, damage to the plaster of the arch. There is a common theme here. Everywhere we look, we see evidence of the biggest enemy of historic buildings: water. The threat grows with the increase in severity of storms. The gutters and drains around the buildings can't handle the volume of water. Last summer, our Sunday school area was flooded, causing damage estimated at almost $50,000. The next section covers the distinctive features and details of the architecture of our buildings. In the report, call-outs on the measured drawings refer to a key table on the same page. In this example, H12 on the drawing refers to the side door of Hale House. The descriptions are written in architectural language. Arched doorway flanked by plain pilasters with finely worked entablature. The entablature means the decorative moldings over the door. The pilasters are the side moldings. Sometimes, photos are used to point out the defining features. The keys are consistent from drawings to photos. H7 in this drawing also refers to H7, the front door of Hale House in this photo. The call-outs and tables are an efficient way to convey information to other architects, preservationists, and tradesmen. The next section deals with code analysis and life safety plans. Unless you are a code compliance officer, you probably don't have a burning desire to read this section. But it will explain why there is sometimes a line for the ladies' room. Our buildings just don't have enough toilets for their capacity. Because our buildings were built before modern codes, we are exempt from most regulations. But we care about the safety of the congregation and others who use our buildings, so we will pay close attention to those recommendations, especially regarding fire safety. In Part 4, we finally get to the reason for the Arcove report: recommendations for the repairs and maintenance of our buildings. The recommendations are broken down into 3 levels. The first is stabilization. These are the things we need to do to keep the buildings from falling down and to protect them from future water damage. The second level details recommendations for making our buildings safer. And the third level are improvements that would make our buildings more energy efficient and accessible. In the pages that follow, the report lays out specific recommendations using keyed floor plans and photos, but in this key system, the number prefix refers to the phase of intervention. In this floor plan of the church, the number 1 in 1F indicates that this item, repointing the mortar of the exterior wall of the organ porch, falls into phase 1, stabilization. Repointing the mortar to keep out water is a critical repair and needs top priority. Item 2B, installing a handrail in the spiral staircase of the turret, falls in the second phase, life safety. Item 3G, installing a weatherproof insulated floor assembly under the bridge, would extend its life and make the space more comfortable in cold weather, but it's not a critical improvement, so it falls in Phase 3. The same key system is used at the end of the report, where there is a rough budget for the recommended repairs and upgrades. So what's the bottom line? The rough budget at the end of the report has some eye-watering numbers. Given that we're dealing with 3 buildings, 2 historic and 1 not exactly young, that's not surprising. But now we have a roadmap for how to tackle our most pressing problems. The numbers in the budget are generated by a database which calculates the cost based on the size of the area involved and the types of materials used. They are not actual bids from contractors. But the budgetary opinion does give us a rough idea of the amount of money we'll need to accomplish each phase of the recommendations. Now that you've seen the Arcove report is not as complicated as it first appears, we hope you'll spend some time with it. Once you understand the key system, it's pretty straightforward. Not only will you understand the challenges our buildings face, you'll learn about their history and the details that make them so unique. Thanks for listening.